Okay, our focus now is on the Asian issue, which involves China, Japan, the Philippines, South Korea, and the rest of the world actually, because this is related to Japanese imperialism and arrogance prior and during the Second World War. Yeah. And it seems it is continuing today, especially with countries that they once oppressed, like the Philippines.
You know, they originally oppressed their own people. The Christians, the Japanese Christians were driven out of Japan. That's why my ancestors in my mother's side were able to come here to the Philippines.
Well, the reason why we invited Ferdie Pasion to this discussion on the Filipina comfort woman, of course he's not a woman, but 4 of his uncles died in the Second World War fighting the Japanese. We invited some of the comfort women, but as you know, they are now in their 90s and they could not make it. But this issue came about again because of a protest by the Chinese embassy to several Philippine institutions and authorities about a Filipina comfort woman statue that was erected along Rojas Boulevard. And this is not in front of the Japanese embassy on Rojas Boulevard. Quite far.
Quite far.
Have you been able to see the place?
Yeah. It's far from the Japanese embassy.
And this is unlike in South Korea, where the statue is right in front of the Japanese embassy.
It would have been better if we placed it in front of the Japanese embassy.
So we begin by this question from Rappler about what's wrong with the statue of a comfort woman. It is a historical fact. It is a historical truth.
Yes.
This is a quote from Teresita Angsi, one of the co-founders of the Kaisa, the 30-year-old Chinese-Filipino group that
Kaisa sa Kaunlaran.
Kaisa sa Kaunlaran. I do not understand that we have to deal with our friends and neighbors. I do understand that we have to deal with our friends and neighbors cordially and diplomatically, but this does not mean we have to be subservient to unreasonable demands. The Japanese occupation is a fact. The atrocities, persecution, massacres, rape, and other war crimes are facts. And these we cannot and should not deny. That's the statement of Teresita Angsi, because the Japanese embassy questioned this erection of the statue with the National Historical Commission and with the City of Manila. The statue, of course, has the approval of the National Historical Commission because the name of the National Historical Commission is on the plaque. But right now, they're backtracking, and as we know, bureaucrats are very sensitive to any responsibility that is becoming a controversy. And I understand Manila has denied that they have issued a permit. And the city administrator and the legal counsel of the mayor have said that they do not see any permit issued for this.
I don't think there should be any need for any permit, just to remind our people of the tremendous atrocities committed by the evil imperialist Japanese government at that time against the Filipino people. The Philippines, if our leaders are not brave to face the Japanese in reminding our people about their atrocities, it must be the people themselves.
Well, one thing important that I'd like to remind ourselves and our audience is that this is not about the Japanese people. This is about the present Japanese government. We know that the several past Japanese governments have already apologized for World War II and for the comfort women. We know the debate continues, but we know also the present Shinzo Abe government is standing by the legacy of actually his father.
Yeah, the Japanese Imperial Army.
That's right. And let us not mistake the attitude of the Japanese people, which is anti-imperialist.
Yes. As I said, my middle name is Ayano. I have Japanese blood in me. But we are against the
And you have Japanese eyes also.
the imperialism of Japan. We are not against the Japanese people because the Japanese people themselves are against war. They are pacifist. It is only this government which is tied with the Japanese Imperial Army of World War II.
Yes. Well, again, we want to say that this is not just a Philippine issue. In San Francisco, in several other cities of the United States, they have these comfort women statues. And of course, in South Korea, the new president of South Korea. Anyway, there's this report. This is, I think, the opinion of comment of Cosmos Yvette Tan. It's heartbreaking that instead of standing up for wronged Filipinos, our DFA is embarrassed by them. It's maddening that a city sisterhood is more important to the DFA than the welfare of the country's comfort women. And I think Yokohama and San Francisco were sister cities, and Yokohama broke the arrangement, and San Francisco did not touch the comfort women statue. Let's move on to the other images there. I think we have some other images of statues from other parts of the world. And I hope we were able to include the South Korean update because sa South Korea, the new President Moon Jae-in has said that a previous agreement signed in 2015 is flawed and they want to revive and renegotiate it. But there you see, right in front of the Japanese embassy is the statue of the comfort woman, South Korean comfort woman.
Actually, it's minimizing the issue. It's not only the women that were the victims of the atrocities of the Japanese Imperial Army, but also the elderly and the children. Even the babies were bayoneted.
Yes. And, well, it is one of the groups lobbying in Manila to kowtow to the Japanese embassy demand is the tourism, one of the tourism associations, because they say this will turn away Japanese tourists, which I doubt.
Yes.
I have serious doubt. I don't know. The Japanese tourists do not come just for these particular statues or sites. They come here for many reasons.
And the Japanese tourists are continuing to go to South Korea despite of the, let's say, misunderstanding between the government of South Korea and Japan.
That's right. Yeah.
And if General Antonio Luna is alive today, he will ask the Tourist Association of the Philippines, which is more important to you, negosyo o bansa?
And our assistant producers have just flashed the image of the kamikaze pilot in Mabalacat. This is really something that would ridicule the Filipino in front of the world.
Yes.
We were victims of the Second World War. These kamikaze pilots were one of the instruments of the Japanese Imperial Army, and yet there is a kamikaze shrine in Mabalacat, Pampanga, funded by the Japanese.
Yes, not only in Mabalacat, but also in Montalban.
I didn't know that, in Montalban. So, this really appears so weird to many people that we would enshrine the enemy's heroes.
Because after World War II, we demanded reparations and payments for the damages. And then when the Japanese flooded us with so-called aid, we became soft against the Japanese. We forgot that even if how many dollars or how many yens that they will give us, forever they will be in debt to us because the lives of the people cannot be replaced with money. They killed so many Filipinos. And as I said, the Christians in Japan, the Japanese Christians, they killed a lot of Japanese Christians, which became Filipinos also. They fled to the Philippines. So the Japanese government will forever owe the Filipino people and even the Japanese people themselves with whom they committed these atrocities.
Well, I think there are several points that are important to raise here. Number one, this is an expression, to my mind, of Japanese arrogance. or Japanese government arrogance that
Yes.
they can browbeat the Filipinos and the Philippine
The fascist
government.
elements.
And that brings me to the second item. In our Department of Foreign Affairs, there is a Japanese faction. There is a pro-Japanese
Yes.
faction, as there is still a very big pro-American faction.
Yes.
Shall we also allow these factions to dominate the discussion on our foreign relations, on our policy, and on this issue?
We have a term for them. They are the Japanese collaborators.
What do they call it?
The Makapilis.
Makapilis. Yeah. Well, the intention, of course, is not to revive all these, but if the Japanese embassy did not protest this and think that they would be able to force the Philippine government and the Filipino people to accept their impositions, there would have been no issue. This would just have been a reminder of historical facts and historical reality, and a reminder that war should never again be a policy by any Asian government.
And fascism, never again. That's why the Japanese government is now becoming again a fascist government, interfering in the internal affairs of an independent country. Let us remember that we are an independent country. We are no longer a colony of Japan.
Yeah.
We must now stand up against Japan for its and tell Japan that these atrocities will never be forgotten.
I would also like to think that we are trying to communicate to the Japanese people that their government today, under Shinzo Abe and the revivalist of the the Japanese military spirit, should be their responsibility. Of course, they have voted in pacifist administrations before, but during these times of crisis, I'm sure the Americans collaborate with the ruling powers in Japan to install what they feel would be more strategically timely or useful for them.
Let us remember that General MacArthur ordered all Filipino forces to refrain from engaging the Japanese in military encounters during World War II. But because of the many atrocities and abuses, the Hukbong Bayan Laban sa Hapon o Hukbalahap led by Luis Taruk were forced against the wall. They were forced to defend the people against these assaults, the defenseless people. That's why the forces of Luis Taruk disobeyed the order of MacArthur and engaged the Japanese in many battles.
As for the economic aid so-called of Japan, again, who needs who more? Japan today is beleaguered by pressures from the Korean Peninsula, not only the north, but South Korea. And Japan is no longer the number one trading partner of the Philippines. It's now China. What are they threatening? They have a subway project in the Philippines that charges very low interest rate. Who needs who more?
Yes.
If we need more trains, Japan needs more markets for its economy that has been moribund for 2 decades. Japan has negative interest rates. That is why it needs more projects outside, so they will continue to come to the Philippines and look for projects here.
And it is predicted by many economists that Japan and the Western world, including the United States, will suffer a Great Depression once again within 2018. So we do not need to associate ourselves with Japan. We can actually say to Japan, go to hell where you belong. We do not need you here.
If you will take this attitude.
Yes.
We are friends of the Japanese people. The Philippines and Japan have very important economic ties, cultural ties. We have Japan depends on tens of thousands of Filipinos to keep their economy going.
And many Japanese men have actually fell in love with our Filipino women and produced Filipino-Japanese children.
Yeah, in fact, there is a projection that by 2050, unless Japanese policies change, their population will be smaller than the Philippines. Where will their labor force be coming from? So let us not be impressed by this attempted pressuring of the Japanese government through the Japanese embassy in Manila. And let us look at this with dignity and pride and let us share with the Japanese government some understanding of what dignity and pride is, and they should not stoop to do this with a country that has been friendly to them despite the historical truth.
Let us not become collaborators of the Japanese Imperial Army once again. And let us remember our true heroes who fought against the Japanese Imperial Army. Because right now, we are glorifying the collaborators instead of the true heroes.
Well, the truth is, many of the collaborators were rehabilitated by the Americans after the Second World War so that they could control the government.
Yes.
In fact, that control continued until Noynoy Aquino, who kowtowed to the Japanese on these issues of Asian concerns, such as the South China Sea issue and so on. On the BBL issues and so on, he was called to Japan, to Tokyo,
Yes.
to negotiate.
Yes, Japan is trying to actually, I would like to say it here, Japan is actually involved in a project to separate Mindanao from the Philippines because the Japanese is very starved for oil. And they know that Mindanao has tremendous deposits of oil, natural gas, and uranium. That's why Japan has been supporting the Memorandum of Agreement on Ancestral Domain and the Bangsamoro Basic Law. So this is again another interference in our internal affairs.
Okay. So we'll sum up this discussion on the controversy on the World War II Filipina Comfort Women's Statue. Let it remain where it is. Let the Japanese embassy retract its protest. The Philippines does not need to bend before the imposition of the Japanese embassy. The Japanese embassy will realize that they need the Filipinos and the Philippines more today than we need them.
It's better to remove the Japanese embassy than the statue.
Okay. Well, any final statement?
Well, in behalf of the nationalist Filipinos against foreign intervention, we encourage the Filipino people to continue the fight in guarding our democracy and our sovereignty against foreign interference.
Okay, and on my part, I hope this will just pass very soon, and we will continue to maintain the dignity of the Japanese embassy here, treat it respectfully, and let this incident go into oblivion and go back to our normal relations with the Japanese embassy and the Japanese government. But with the Japanese people, we are one. We are Asian. We are brothers. We are one family. We will continue to be happy as a part of the Asian community. With that, what's your Chinese word for bye-bye or Zaijian?
Zaijian.
Zaijian. Okay, so
See you. Zaijian.
Zaijian. See you again. Zaijian. Okay, maraming salamat po and have a good weekend.